Early life and first revelation prophet Muhammad was born in the city of Mecca in the year 570. This year is remembered as the Year of the Elephant because of an important event when an army with elephants tried to attack the Kaaba but failed. Muhammad belonged to the tribe of Quraysh, and his family was respected though not very wealthy. His father Abdullah passed away before he was born, and his mother Amina also passed away when he was still a young child. After that, he was raised first by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib and later by his uncle Abu Talib. As a young boy, Muhammad worked as a shepherd and later helped in trade caravans. He grew up known for his honesty and truthfulness. The people of Mecca called him Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy. This name stayed with him for his whole life. He never cheated or lied and was always kind to others. When he grew older, he started working with trade caravans that traveled long distances. During these journeys, he met many people from different cultures and religions. His good manners and honesty impressed everyone. A wealthy businesswoman named Khadija hired him to manage her trade. When she saw his honesty and success, she proposed marriage to him. Muhammad accepted, and they lived happily together. Their marriage was full of respect and love. Khadija supported him in every stage of life. Even though Muhammad lived in a busy city, he often felt the need for peace and reflection. He would go to the Cave of Hira near Mecca to spend time alone in prayer and thinking. He was worried about the problems in society, like injustice, idol worship, and the poor being ignored. He wanted answers and guidance. At the age of 40, during one of his retreats in the cave, something happened that changed his life and the world. The angel Jibril appeared before him and commanded him to read. Muhammad replied that he could not read, but the angel repeated the command. Then the first verses of the Quran were revealed. These verses told him to read in the name of Allah, who created man from a clot and who teaches by the pen. Muhammad was deeply shaken by this experience. He hurried home to Khadija, who comforted him and believed in him. She knew he was a truthful man and that Allah had chosen him for a great mission. She took him to her cousin Waraka ibn Nawfal, who was knowledgeable about earlier scriptures. Waraka confirmed that Muhammad had received a revelation like the earlier prophets. After this moment, Muhammad slowly began to share the message of Islam. At first, he told only his close family and friends. Khadija was the first to accept Islam, followed by his cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib, his friend Abu Bakr, and his servant Zayd. They formed the first small community of Muslims in Mecca. This was the beginning of his mission. The message was simple and powerful. There is only one God, Allah, and He alone deserves worship. People must be honest, help the poor, and live with justice. This message challenged the leaders of Mecca, who gained wealth and power through idol worship and unfair trade. In the early years, Muhammad and his followers faced mockery and rejection, but they remained patient. Their faith grew stronger with every revelation that came to him. The Quran continued to guide them and prepare them for the challenges ahead. Struggles in Mecca and the early followers. As Prophet Muhammad began to share the message of Islam more openly, the leaders of Quraysh grew worried. The new religion called people to worship only Allah and to leave behind idol worship. The Kaaba was filled with idols, and the Quraysh made money from the pilgrims who came to honor these idols. They feared that if people accepted Islam, their power and wealth would be lost. At first, the opposition was mild. The Quraysh tried to mock Muhammad and say that he was only a poet or a magician. They hoped people would not take him seriously. But as the message spread, more people accepted Islam. Many of the early Muslims were poor people, slaves, and those without strong families to protect them. They saw hope in Islam because it taught equality, justice, and kindness. The Quraysh then began to use force. They beat and tortured the weak Muslims to make them give up their new faith. One of the most famous examples was Bilal ibn Rabah, a slave who accepted Islam. His master tortured him by placing a heavy stone on his chest under the hot sun of Mecca. Yet Bilal did not give up his belief and kept saying, Allah is one. Abu Bakr saw his suffering and bought his freedom. Bilal later became one of the most beloved companions of the Prophet. Other Muslims also suffered greatly. Ammar ibn Yasir and his parents faced terrible torture. His mother Sumayya became the first martyr of Islam when she was killed for refusing to deny her faith. The Prophet comforted Ammar and told him that Allah would reward his family with paradise. The Quraysh leaders also tried to pressure Abu Talib, the uncle of Muhammad. They wanted him to stop protecting his nephew. Abu Talib loved Muhammad, and even though he did not accept Islam, he always defended him. He told the Quraysh that he could not abandon his nephew no matter what threats they made. This support was a shield for the Prophet during those hard years. As the number of Muslims grew, the Quraysh became more violent. The Prophet advised some of his followers to leave Mecca and seek refuge in Abyssinia, a land ruled by a Christian king known for his justice. A group of Muslims, including Uthman ibn Affan and his wife Ruqayyah, the daughter of the Prophet, made this journey. The king of Abyssinia welcomed them and gave them protection after hearing about Islam. This was known as the first migration in Islam. Meanwhile, in Mecca, the Prophet continued his mission with patience and wisdom. He called people to gather and listen to the words of the Quran. Some rejected him with anger, but others began to think deeply. Umar ibn al-Khattab was at first one of the strongest enemies of Islam. One day he set out with anger in his heart, intending to harm the Prophet. On his way, he learned that his own sister and her husband had accepted Islam. When he entered their house, he heard them reciting verses of the Quran. The words touched his heart and made him think. Soon after, Umar went to the Prophet and accepted Islam. His acceptance was a great strength for the Muslims because Umar was known for his courage and influence. During these years, the Muslims faced a very hard test. The Quraysh made a pact to cut off all relations with the Prophet and his followers. They were forced to live in a valley outside Mecca without trade or support. Food became very scarce, and the Muslims suffered hunger for nearly 3 years. Children cried from lack of food, and the situation was painful. Yet they stayed strong in faith. Finally, some of the Quraysh who saw the cruelty of this pact decided to end it. The boycott was lifted, but the hardship left deep marks on the small Muslim community. Soon after these trials, the Prophet faced another sorrow. His uncle Abu Talib passed away, and not long after his beloved wife Khadija also died. This year became known as the Year of Sorrow. Abu Talib had protected him from the Quraysh, and Khadija had given him love and support. Losing both of them in the same year was very difficult for the Prophet. Yet his trust in Allah remained firm. After these painful events, Allah granted the Prophet a special gift known as the night journey and ascension. One night he was taken from the Kaaba in Mecca to the farthest mosque in Jerusalem. From there, he was taken up through the heavens, where he met earlier prophets and was shown many signs. During this journey, Allah gave the command for Muslims to pray 5 times a day. This journey was a source of strength for the Prophet and his followers. Despite the growing hardships, the message of Islam continued to spread. Some people in the city of Yathrib, later known as Medina, heard about the Prophet and invited him to come to their city. They hoped he could bring peace among their tribes who were often in conflict. They accepted Islam and promised to support him if he came to live with them. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Islam. Part 2 ends with the Muslims preparing for migration to Medina. This journey would change everything. Islam was about to move from a small community under persecution in Mecca to a society with freedom and strength in Medina. The trials of Mecca had shaped the Muslims into a strong and patient group, ready for the next stage of their mission. The migration to Medina and building a new community when the Prophet Muhammad saw that the people of Mecca would not stop their cruelty and that his followers were suffering greatly, he looked for a place where Islam could grow in peace. Allah opened a new door of hope. People from the city of Yathrib, which was later called Medina, came to Mecca for pilgrimage. They met the Prophet and listened to the message of Islam. They were touched by the words of the Quran and by the character of the Prophet. They accepted Islam and promised to support him. These people returned to their city and shared the message with their families. The following year, a larger group from Yathrib came to meet the Prophet. They made a pledge of loyalty to him known as the Pledge of Aqaba. They promised to protect him as they would protect their own families. This was a turning point. The Prophet told his followers to prepare for migration to Medina. One by one, the Muslims began to leave Mecca quietly. The Quraysh became angry when they saw the Muslims moving to a new city where they could be free. They planned to harm the Prophet himself. They gathered in Dar al-Nadwa, their council house, and agreed on a plot to kill him. Each clan would send one strong man to attack him together so that no single tribe could be blamed. But Allah protected his messenger. The angel Jibril informed the Prophet about the plan. That night the Prophet asked his cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib to sleep in his bed while he left the house under the cover of darkness. The Quraysh surrounded the house, but when they entered in the morning they found Ali instead of Muhammad. The Prophet had already set out on the journey with his close friend Abu. Bakr, the two companions, took refuge in the Cave of Hira south of Mecca. The Quraysh searched everywhere and even reached the mouth of the cave. Abu Bakr felt afraid, but the Prophet calmed him by saying, "Do not be sad, Allah is with us." When the Quraysh looked, they saw a spider's web and a bird's nest at the entrance and thought no one could be inside. They left, and the Prophet and Abu Bakr continued their journey safely. The migration known as the Hijrah was the beginning of a new chapter in Islamic history. The Muslims reached Medina, where they were welcomed warmly. The people of Medina who had accepted Islam were called the Ansar, the helpers. Those who came from Mecca were called the Muhajirun, the emigrants. The Prophet joined the two groups together like brothers so that the emigrants who had left their homes and wealth could be supported. One of the first tasks of the Prophet in Medina was to build a mosque. This mosque, called Masjid al-Nabawi, became the center of worship, learning, and community life. It was simple in structure but full of spirit. The Prophet himself worked with his companions to carry bricks and build the walls. The mosque was not only a place for prayer but also a school, meeting place and a shelter for the poor. The Prophet also established a treaty between the Muslims and the different tribes and groups living in Medina, including the Jewish tribes. This treaty, known as the Constitution of Medina, created rules for living together in peace. It gave freedom of religion to all communities and made Medina a united city where justice and mutual defense were shared. Responsibilities. Life in Medina was different from Mecca. Here the Muslims could practice their religion openly. The call to prayer was introduced. Bilal, the freed slave who had suffered so much in Mecca, was chosen as the first muezzin. His beautiful voice called people to prayer 5 times a day. The Muslims also began to organize their lives according to the guidance of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet. However, the Quraysh of Mecca did not stop their hostility. They continued to threaten Medina and took the wealth and homes that the Muslims had left behind. The Muslims were now allowed by Allah to defend themselves. This marked the beginning of battles between the Muslims of Medina and the Quraysh of Mecca. The first major battle was the Battle of Badr. The Quraysh had sent a large caravan for trade, and the Prophet and his companions set out to intercept it as a way to regain some of what had been taken from them. The Quraysh gathered a strong army of about 1,000 men, while the Muslims numbered only around 300. Despite being fewer in number, the Muslims fought with courage and faith. They prayed for Allah's help and were granted victory. Many Quraysh leaders were killed, and the Muslims saw this as a clear sign that Allah was with them. This victory raised the status of the Muslims in Arabia. People began to see that Islam was strong and supported by Allah, yet the Quraysh did not give up. They prepared again to take revenge. The next year, they came with a large army, and the Muslims met them at the Battle of Uhud. At first, the Muslims gained the upper hand, but some archers disobeyed the Prophet's command and left their positions. This mistake allowed the Quraysh to attack from behind. The Prophet himself was injured, and many Muslims were martyred, including Hamza, the beloved uncle of the Prophet. The Battle of Uhud was a painful test that taught the Muslims discipline and patience. After Uhud, the Quraysh and their allies planned an even greater attack. They gathered a massive army and marched to Medina. The Muslims dug a trench around the city to protect it. This was a new idea, suggested by Salman the Persian, one of the companions. The trench made it impossible for the Quraysh to enter. After weeks of siege, the enemy became tired and divided. A strong wind sent by Allah scattered their camp, and they withdrew. This event became known as the Battle of the Trench, or Ahzab. It showed once again that Allah supported his messenger. In Medina, the community of Muslims was becoming stronger. The teachings of Islam were guiding every part of life, from worship to family relations, trade, and justice. The Prophet was not only a messenger, but also a leader, teacher, and judge. People came to him with their problems, and he always showed fairness and mercy. He taught his companions to be kind to neighbors, to help the poor, and to treat women with respect and honor. The conquest of Mecca and the final years after. The Battle of the Trench, the Quraysh could no longer threaten Medina as before. The Muslims were becoming stronger day by day, and many tribes of Arabia were turning toward Islam. The Prophet continued to guide his companions with patience and wisdom. His goal was not only victory in battles, but also the spread of peace and justice. A few years after the Battle of the Trench, the Prophet and his companions set out to perform Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage. They were not carrying weapons, for war only simple travel arms. When they reached a place called Hudaybiyah, the Quraysh stopped them and refused to let them enter Mecca. After long discussions, a treaty was signed. This agreement was known as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. According to this treaty, the Muslims would return to Medina that year, but they would be allowed to come back the following year to perform Umrah. The treaty also allowed other tribes to join either side. At first, many Muslims felt unhappy with the terms of the treaty. They thought it was unfair, but the Prophet accepted it with wisdom because he saw it as a step toward peace and a chance for Islam to spread without war. In the next 2 years, many people entered Islam as they saw its teachings up close. The treaty gave the Muslims time to invite others peacefully and to show the beauty of their faith. Later, the Quraysh broke the treaty by attacking a tribe allied with the Muslims. This violation gave the Prophet a reason to march toward Mecca. In the year 630, he gathered a large army of 10,000 Muslims and advanced toward the city. The Quraysh were shocked by the size of the army and knew they could not win. The Prophet entered Mecca almost without bloodshed. When he entered the city, he showed great mercy. He declared a general pardon for the Quraysh. Those who had harmed him for years were forgiven. He said, "Today there is no blame on you, you are free." The Prophet then entered the Kaaba. It was filled with idols placed there by the Quraysh and other tribes. With his companions, he removed and destroyed the idols one by one, declaring that truth has come and falsehood has vanished. The Kaaba was purified and restored as the house of Allah for the worship of one God alone. This was a great moment in the history of Islam. After the conquest of Mecca, many tribes of Arabia came forward to accept Islam. The Prophet sent his companions to different regions to teach the people. Islam spread quickly across the Arabian Peninsula. The message of worshipping only Allah and living with justice and kindness entered the hearts of thousands. In the year 632, the Prophet performed his only Hajj, which is remembered as the farewell pilgrimage. During this Hajj, he gave a famous sermon known as the farewell sermon. In this sermon, he reminded the people that all humans are equal, no matter their race or color, that men must treat women with kindness, and that Muslims should hold firmly to the Quran and his teachings. He told them that after him no prophet would come, and that they must stay united. His words became a guiding light for all Muslims until today. Soon after returning from this pilgrimage, the Prophet fell ill. His sickness grew day by day. He spent his last days in the house of his wife Aisha. Even while sick, he continued to lead and advise his companions. One day when he was too weak, he asked Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. This showed the Muslims who would guide them after his passing. On Monday, the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year 632, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed away at the age of 63. The whole city of Medina was filled with sorrow. The companions could not believe that the man who had guided them for more than 20 years was gone. Abu Bakr stood before the people and reminded them that Muhammad was the messenger of Allah, but Allah himself never dies. This calmed the hearts of the people and gave them strength. The Prophet was buried in the chamber of Aisha next to the mosque. His final resting place became the heart of Medina and is visited with love by millions of Muslims to this day. The story of Prophet Muhammad is the story of a man chosen by Allah to guide humanity. From being an orphan in Mecca to becoming the leader of a nation, he lived with honesty, patience, and mercy. His life changed the course of history forever. He left behind the Quran and his teachings as a clear path for all those who believe in Allah. Part 4 ends with the passing of the Prophet, but his mission continues in the hearts of Muslims everywhere. His story is not only history, but also guidance for all times, reminding us to worship Allah alone and to live with justice, compassion, and truth.